I think that what you see right now in contemporary NATO is an alliance that has gone through a variety of changes, but is today as robust as certainly it's ever been, with more nations that are involved, a clearer sense of purpose, uh, real disagreements that are probably very healthy disagreements about how aggressively to confront Vladimir Putin's government, and some real questions about what sort of posture it is incumbent upon NATO to take towards China. There's a lot of disagreement there because, of course, it's a little bit outside of the original scope of the alliance. So the end of the Soviet Union did not result in the end of the purpose, the primary purpose for NATO to exist. It remains really as important as ever. And in many ways, though there are these disagreements, they're healthy disagreements, and so I think you can say as strong as ever.
So that's so interesting, because obviously one gets the impression that sort of the US's relationship with NATO is somewhat in the balance. I was unaware that there are kind of US politicians that talk about NATO having a role in terms of the US's, let's call it a standoff with China. That's a real debate, is it?
Yeah, I think that is something that U.S. State Department officials are looking to bring all of the different countries within NATO into some better agreement, and also NATO itself. And of course, within NATO, there's a lot of sense that with the threat of Russia so close and so real, that the focus should be there. But in terms of the character of the autocracy in Russia and the character of the autocracy in China, the pitch from the Biden administration, and this was really sort of characterized as his entire foreign policy approach, is that it is incumbent on allies in democracy, democratic nations, democratically minded nations, to stand tall against that sort of unified threat of autocracy, because, of course, China and Russia are aligned on a lot of very key issues. They all seek for the diminishment of democratic societies. And so there should be better alignment within NATO countries on how to confront both naturally, even if the posture towards China is less militaristic. There's a lot of things that NATO democracies can do as part of a bloc to basically better compete with China.
How interesting. So Peter Conradi from the Sunday Times, this anniversary, this 75th anniversary, is particularly interesting because, of course, Finland and Sweden have joined NATO in direct response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. How has that sort of overlain these celebrations, this anniversary?
Yes, they have indeed, and it's yet the latest stage in what have been a long series of enlargements of NATO, starting from its foundation in 1949. I think we can't talk about NATO without what I think is my favourite quote about the organisation from its first Secretary General, a Briton called Lord Ismay, and he said the purpose of NATO was to, quote, keep the Soviet Union out, the Americans in, and the Germans down. So what has happened in the intervening period is it's not so much about keeping the Germans down as it was immediately after the Second World War, but actually getting them to contribute more and to play their role in Europe in terms of defence. But the other two, aims have remained remarkably consistent. It's still with an increasingly aggressive Vladimir Putin, particularly after his invasion of Ukraine a couple of years ago. It's really about keeping Russia rather than the Soviet Union out, and with an impending election victory for Donald Trump, it will certainly be about trying to keep the Americans in. So, the accession of Finland and Sweden is essentially a direct result of the invasion of Ukraine, which has made those two countries realize that want and need to be a part of it.
You're breaking up a bit there, Peter, but I want to persist with you because obviously the other interesting thing about this 75th anniversary celebration is that it comes at a time when we are due to get, I think this year, a new Secretary General of NATO. Mark Rutte, the former Prime Minister of the Netherlands, I think he may still be in post, but he's lost the election, is being talked about. We've had 3 Dutch NATO Secretary Generals. Katja Kallas, the Prime Minister of Estonia, could also be a candidate who would be obviously the first woman to lead NATO.
Yeah, there was, for a long time, there was a desire, I think, to have a woman in this role. Kaja Kallas was certainly mentioned, as were a few other women from Central Eastern Europe. It does, in fact, look like it's likely to be Rutte. Most countries, including the United States, have swung behind him. There are still 4 that are opposed, though, who want Klaus Iohannis, you may say. Who's
I
the
was about to
president
say,
of
who's
Romania.
Klaus Iohannis?
He's the president of Romania. One of those four countries is surprisingly Romania itself, so they probably don't count. But Hungary in particular is being awkward. They don't like Rutte because of some mean things Rutte said about Viktor Orban, the Hungarian leader, a couple of years ago. So it looks like there will be a kind of battle, but I think the smart money is on Rutte, despite being yet another Dutchman.
It is interesting, of course, you forget that NATO is full, as it were, of the awkward squad. It's not a homogenous body. Hungary being one obvious one, but Turkey being another. How does Turkey, in terms of the participation in the 75th anniversary, Turkey's stance, it kicked off obviously about Sweden in particular joining NATO for, in their view, harbouring terrorists. But how is Turkey's role developing?
Yeah, I mean, Turkey, it should be noted, is also one of the four who was opposing Rutte, probably just on principle for being awkward. They, as you're right, they and Hungary are the two sort of difficult ones. Turkey has a particularly curious relationship because Erdogan, its leader, is quite close to Vladimir Putin, which you could say could be a sort of an advantage as a sort of a bridge between the two. But also, there's always a suspicion that he's trying to basically play NATO off against Russia in a way, and to extract what he can from this special relationship. But formally speaking, the Turks will certainly be taking part in the celebrations. But behind the scenes, I think causing a little bit of chaos and discomfort.
Today we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the strongest, most enduring, and most successful alliance in history. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. Congratulations. Fair burden sharing is essential. And Europe is investing more, much more. This year, the majority of NATO allies will invest at least 2% of their GDP in defense. At the same time, North America also needs Europe. European allies provide world-class militaries, vast intelligence networks, and unique diplomatic leverage, multiplying America's might. To NATO, the United States has more friends and more allies than any other major power.
We tried to embrace Russia, but we knew that the potential for violence was there. Unfortunately, Russia is on the march again. But happily, we are where we belong, in the company of democracies, among friends, at home. Resisting again, like a rock. Let's prevail again.